So over the years, there was a level of access that my family had to him that seemed from the outside looking in as preferential treatment, seen as you're special. And I think people in the church would likely have seen that, thought that we were blessed, we were highly favored and close to the man of God. People might have even envied it. Actually, I think there were quite a few people that did. He would support my family in very practical ways. He would identify the deficits, needs, the struggles, either show up directly as a resource to fix that or point them in the right direction, meaningful referral even. He would be helpful. He was useful. He was present. In church culture, especially when people are struggling financially or emotionally, that kind of support is not neutral. You know, it deepens loyalty. It comes at an expense. It looks like God's hand is working through the man of God. And for me specifically, those were favors. They were rides. They were gifts that I would get secretly to my dorm room or to my house, or sometimes not even secretly in front of everybody. It was public recognition in front of everybody. It was leadership opportunities. It was public affection. It was private dependence. It happened over time. Yes, when I say the grooming involved my community, I mean that his trust with my family created easier access to me. His spiritual credibility with them lowered their guard, lowered the alarm system that was around me. Once that trust was established, I became the target under cover of trust. So let's take this even further. I think people always want to know why young people don't speak up. And I think I spoke to this before, but I'm going to keep on. Let me answer this clearly from inside the experience. By the time boundaries started really moving, the people I might have gone to and historically, they no longer felt available to me in the same way. And I'm talking about my family. I know it's hard to say, but it's true. The main person I would have told at that time would have been my aunt. She was, before church, my involvement, she was my advocate. She was a protector for me. She was a matriarch. She saw many of the ways that the adults and other cultural aspects of my upbringing would not necessarily support me. She was my caregiver. She was a major source of emotional protection for me in my adolescence. But he had already co-opted her trust in my mind. She believed in him spiritually. He would counsel her through her marital issues and her husband. So all bets were off when it came to me believing that I would be believed, I would have the same level of trust. Because he represented in her mind a relationship to God, I believe that I believe that I just couldn't compete with that. I believe there was no way that I couldn't compete. I didn't believe that my word would carry more weight than his. Yeah. I feared that telling the truth would force her into a level of cognitive dissonance so severe that she would have to make a choice. And I wasn't confident that choice would be, I wasn't sure that I would be chosen. That was a terrible place for me as a young person. It's a terrible place for any young person to be in, right? To feel that the adult who protects you may not be able to protect you from the man of God. So beyond her, there was no structure that I trusted at that time. There was no board, I believe, there was no board that I believe belonged, that was for the people. His leaders, they belonged to him. His leaders were his. His board, they belonged to him. They were not there to hold him accountable on behalf of vulnerable people. I didn't see that. I saw them even fearful of him in some ways. He established a dominance over them. So they were not there to move. They were there to move how he moved exactly. His women leaders were his inner circle. There was no hotline that I knew about. There was no youth protocol. I think that absence matters. That absence matters because real protection systems are not vague expectations about behavior or they're not anything like that, right? They are formal safeguards. They are independent reporting channels. They are written protection policies. They are external review structures. From where I could see as a young person during that time, in that environment, those kinds of protections were not clearly present or visible, which meant, concerns were expected to move through the same leadership hierarchy that held power. And that's problematic. So many memories are coming back to me and feelings about this, but there was no district office that I knew how to access, right? No written process that I could trust, no independent structures that felt safe. So what was left, right? I was silenced. That's all I could do. I could only be quiet. I could only observe. So silence, observation, compliance, that is what was left for me. So now let me tell you where the boundaries started moving. And let me tell you where it started feeling really wrong in my body. Not just confusing, not just wrong, but there were many moments. I may not remember every exact sequence perfectly without the documents in front of me. I remember the feeling. I remember the shifts, right? I remember when mentorship stopped feeling like mentorship. One major turning point was physical affection. He would ask me to hold his hand quite often. At first, it would be framed spiritually. Can you hold my hand and pray with me? And that hand holding, just something about it didn't feel right to me. Sometimes it would awkwardly linger. He would ask me, can you support me? Can I hold you? These kinds of things. A hug would be asked, and then the hugs would linger. And then eventually the lingering hugs would move into, can I hold you and embrace? Can you be close to me? And it would happen during our drives when we were driving solo, during emotional loaded moments. Whenever I felt discomfort, he would justify the closeness to scripture. He would reference armor bearers and adjutants and man-on-man platonic relationships or spiritual relationships to justify his actions. He would compare our relationships to biblical male relationships that he said were platonic. He said that they were healthy, they were necessary, they were spiritually meaningful. He always had a scriptural rationale, always a framework, always a way to reinterpret my discomfort as immaturity. I was misunderstanding or lacking the spiritual understanding. He was the only one that could to bring clarity. And at that age, I did not have the critical capacity, the critical spiritual capacity or spiritual confidence to directly confront that in real time. So I complied, but I complied with discomfort. A lingering bodily discomfort was very much my experience, and a sense that something was off even when I didn't yet have the language for it. At that time, I was getting attention. I had never really gotten, from a male father type figure before. And so he made me feel seen in a lot of ways, special, prioritized. He was instrumental during the time I started college. He would pick me up from school, drop me off. Help was quick. He would be right there. He gave me what I needed without pushback, and there were school supplies, there were rides, there were support, there were provisions. And for a young person who grew up not feeling consistently prioritized, those things mattered to me. And he wasn't the only one that was supportive of me. He kind of also encouraged the church members to also do the same. So there were a lot of church members that would actually do the same thing for me, especially while I was going to school. They would send me things. So he created a environment where it was okay for him to do it too, because everybody else was doing it. So it didn't seem off. And that can bind you emotionally before you even understand the cost. And that's what happened to me.